welcome back. Welcome back. All right, so we're here, episode 19. Can't believe I'm 19 episodes in. But this episode is going to be about, basically going into debt for holiday spending. Last year, 2024, we saw some record numbers, and they're anticipating that we see some record numbers this year. So, more or less, just some interesting some facts that I wanted to share when I was doing some research. I found a lot of really interesting pieces, and I'm like, man, it definitely is the season of giving. So you definitely want to make sure you give and you show your love. But you also don't want to put yourself in a corner. Of course, you want to be there for your kids and things like that. So, we're going to sacrifice for our kids. That's what it means to be a parent. So, but it was just really interesting of what I saw. So we're definitely going to dive into that throughout the video. For now, we're already going to do our intro here. So, you got the NBA update. So, my top 5 in the NBA for MVP to start the season was Luka, Jokic, SGA, Giannis, Wemby. My dark horse was Cade Cunningham, who is currently sitting first seed in the East. So, we'll see where that goes. We'll see what that goes. Pistons are looking good, but right now, Jokic to me is runaway MVP right now. It's not even close, in my opinion. The things the man is doing this year is unreal. He should have won last year, but NBA politics gets in the way. There's no way you can deny him the MVP this year. So, I think Jokic is here to crown another MVP. With that being said, moving on, we do have our business website up and running. We got our holiday scents ready to go. So we do have our Christmas scents available at our Kai's Wicks Shopify page. 30% off every order for the holiday season. It's our gift to our customers. It's a gift to our family. Just in trying to make spending a little bit easier on their end. So we try to make our products as affordable as possible to begin with, and we're going to smack on an extra 30% discount with free shipping. Another update, and for me, is I want to start going live on YouTube. So I'm, laying down the groundwork for that, but that will most likely not be more about finance. That'll probably be more about like things that I like, anime, sports, some music, things like that. Hopefully I can get some people to come on to the live with me, and then we can talk it out. This is something that I want to bring people on, and just have a really good conversation throughout the live stream. So, I'm going to announce that. Keep an eye out for that. Just got to make sure, schedule looks right. Running a business, having 2 kids, on top of, one being a newborn, with the 9 to 5, on top of, trying to maintain the house. It's been a lot, but, here we are, and we just got to keep pushing through. So where to invest? So we saw gold went down, stocks went down, Bitcoin took a massive dive from 125, which I think it's hovering around, 90K right now at the time of this recording. People seeing a lot of panic in the news, people seeing, should I pull out? Should I do this? Should I do that? In my opinion, you should only pull out if you're in a position to pull out. So, someone like me who's just trying to get started, lay the groundwork for my portfolio, I see this as a buying opportunity. 90K, we haven't really seen that in some time with Bitcoin. So, you saw it hover around like the 115s, the 112s, it hit 125 this year, it peaked at 125. So there's room for growth, of course. So that's why I think it's good to, try to get in now. Even stocks. So you're seeing a rebound in stocks. Stocks were taking a dip last week, back-to-back losses, back-to-back red days, back-to-back L's. But again, I'm here for the long term. So that's why I'm going to keep putting money in, and that gives you the opportunity to buy in a lower price. That's going to help you down the road with your returns. So, yeah, it's one thing to constantly buy in, but you definitely want to make sure you're buying in at, when the time is right. So you're never going to know what the time is right. So it's just good to, keep money on the side and be prepared. So that's one thing. Later on in one of my videos, I'm going to talk about what I want to do for 2026. Going into that for me is just making sure, I have the funds that I want aside, just in case there is a buying opportunity here soon. I'll be ready for that. So, but with all that being said, I'm definitely excited for the holidays, man. This is one of my favorite times of the year besides the cold and the snow, to be honest with you. But, good food, good time, good vibes for the most part. But this is the season to give, so that's what I want to do here as well. I want to give to my family, to my community, things like that. So me and my wife, we got some clothes that we're going to be ready to donate. About to go shopping, get some food, get ready to donate that as well. Because it's bigger than just yourself during these times. And I was watching, Earn Your Leisure. I watch them, every week. And one thing they talked about was how the suicide rate will increase during the holiday seasons because a lot of people could be lonely and a lot of people could be by themselves and they don't have nothing to celebrate or someone to celebrate with. So just hearing that, it made me like, okay, I got some clothes upstairs. I can go out get some food and try to donate and just try to do my part and bringing holiday cheer. So, but definitely getting ready. One thing I've been seeing and been asked about a lot recently from a few people at work and just in my friend group, when does the Christmas tree go up and when does it come down? The Christmas tree does not go up until after Thanksgiving dinner. Once you eat your food, your tummy tight, you ready to go to sleep, take a nap. If you want to bring it up, get to set it up and then decorate it over the weekend. Something you can certainly do. But I don't want to go to your house eating Thanksgiving dinner with the Christmas tree up. I don't know why. It just don't feel right to me. The Christmas tree here in our house definitely goes up after Thanksgiving. And then when does it come down? Look, you got time to recover from New Year's night. After that thing's coming down. So, it's basically you got from end of Thanksgiving to January 2nd, and your tree should be down. So that's my personal opinion on the tree. But with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's dive into the video. So, we're going to kick this off and, hoping that you all enjoy your holiday season.
Disclaimer. The information provided on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. We are not licensed financial professionals, and any opinions shared are based on personal experiences and research. As always, do your own due diligence and consult with a certified financial advisor or professional before making any investment decisions.
All right, how am I prepping for this holiday season? I always tell myself, man, throughout the year, I'm going to put money aside or I'm going to buy gifts throughout the year and just put them to the side so when Christmas comes, I'm all ready to go. The issue is if I get a gift for someone, I want to give it to them right away. And that sucks because if I get it, I'm going to give it to you and I'm going to get something else for you for Christmas. And honestly, the money, you talk about it, you want to put it to the side, and the next thing you know, it's already October, and you're like, man, where has the year gone? So let's just say at this point, right, we're going into December. Back in, end of the October, my last check in October, what I did was I actually stopped my snowball effect. So for those who watched, a couple videos in the past, we talk about the snowball effect, basically, taking your balances and knocking them down from the smallest to the highest. So, we essentially talked about that throughout this podcast. And the reason why I took a break from it is it doesn't make sense to try to snowball my debt to add debt back. So put it this way. If I put $300 into my snowball, right, and then I spend all this money on the holidays, then I'm just essentially zeroing out my progress, right? So I'm essentially zeroing out my progress. So what I'm going to do is for me to free up money, I'm going for the holidays, since we're already basically in quarter 4, I'm going to essentially take my snowball and just put it towards what I would for holiday spending. Good thing is, I'm not traveling this year, so I don't have to pay for traveling expense, whether that's gas, whether that's a hotel, whatever the case may be. We're going to stay put this year. Christmas with 2 kids would be very interesting, as we continue to grow. This year, Miles, the man don't even know what's going on. He just wants his milk and take a nap. So that man has no idea what's going on. Malachi, his Christmas list getting pretty expensive. Tech man, I feel like kids nowadays, they really don't want any toys. So as long as you get him something electronics and get him a monster truck, the man that'll make his day. So Going back to, preparing for yourself for holidays, it's better to have something than nothing, because at least it gives you a little leeway heading into tax time into 2026 or that next year. So it's always better to have something instead of nothing. Um, but again, things are getting expensive. Prices keep going up, whether that's food and gifts. So just making sure I'm doing my part, that I can keep myself afloat and make sure I'm not putting too much of a burden on myself for the holiday seasons. All right, so y'all know I'm gonna come with some statistics, right? So I went through, did my research, took my notes, and I advise you guys to do the same thing. Not even just this topic, but just in general. A lot of times we see things that are online and we want to believe them without doing our research. Well, it's important to do your research. So, but with that being said, NerdWallet, and I'll drop all the links in the bio, but NerdWallet, they estimate that the U.S. adult will spend around $242 billion in gifts. This is all the U.S. adults within the United States. And they would spend about $311 billion on flights and hotels during the holiday season. The average adult is set to spend $1,107 on presents this year, and that's up $182 from the year prior, and that's not including food, right? Because you know how the prices of food been the past year. So why is this a problem? I guess depends how you look at it. If you're someone who just, you may be a high earner, you don't care because you know that, you're just going to, go check to check, just like a low earner, whatever the case may be. Maybe you don't care, and that's completely fine. That's what the lifestyle you want to have. That's all for you. I'm not saying being cheap during holiday season, because of course you don't want that. You want to do the best for your kids and your family. I'm just saying to be mindful of that. So that's really all it is. But 31, and the reason why I'm saying that is because 31% of Americans are still paying off their credit cards from last year's holiday season, which I think is kind of crazy, because you got to think the interest rates that's going on these credit cards now. I mean, you're seeing, especially if you're getting store credit cards like a Best Buy or a Victoria's Secret, American Eagle, you're probably well above 20% interest rate on that, right? So those store cards, those is what really gets those interest rates and drives the stores to really bring in a lot of money. You see people pay at the counter. No. Those stores with those credit cards, they bring in a lot of money because those interest rates are so high, and they know you're going to go spend these on these clothes and on this, on these items, on these electronics. They know you're going to come spend, so that's why they're saying, hey, we're smacking this extremely high interest rate on. On top of that, you got tariffs also driving up the cost of food and gifts right now. That's just a fact. You don't believe me? Go watch Jerome Powell speak. The Fed chair. When I was watching the Fed chair speak, one of the things that he said was, you'll see tariffs essentially have one price hike and it should balance out. Only issue with that is we just had a global pandemic not too long ago that threw our rates through the roof, threw inflation through the roof. So when we did that, we're still sort of recovering for that. So as prices spiked during COVID and they're spiking again, our salaries haven't had enough time to catch up with that. And that's why you'll see on TV the economy's doing so well, but us in American day, average American worker, average American person, we're feeling that in our pockets. And if you don't believe me, if you have a receipt from last year, 2 years ago, look at it compared to this year. It's all right there in front of our faces. So this is why I'm saying it's kind of a problem, because if our salaries aren't going to keep up with the prices of inflation, and then we're adding tariffs on top of that, we're just going to keep losing our buying power, and eventually we won't have no choice but to buy only a select few gifts a year. If things don't start to change, the wealth gap in America is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's becoming a bigger issue, even for the normal day worker, because then prices are going to just have to keep going up. And once that wealth gap keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you're really going to start seeing more like a monopoly. And we already kind of see it with the 1 to 10% of people in America, right? So this is why it's a really big issue that is really underlying. Because at the end of the day, we just want to, do right by our family, by our kids. We want to just enjoy our holidays. Don't have to worry about money. Don't have to want to wake up on the 26th and be like, man, how am I going to figure out to pay this stuff? I remember when, I was young, games were going for like $50, $60. Now you're seeing them going for 80, 100 plus for a video game. And it's kind of crazy. And in my mind, it's like the art of it is getting taken out. And what I mean by that is you got a lot of these companies using artificial intelligence now in their games. So you're not even getting the true artists into the work, but yet they're going to drive up prices. So that is why I'm saying there's a bigger problem. It's not you spending for your kids. It's what's going on behind the scenes is why we have to spend more. Still on the same article, 74% of Americans plan on using their credit cards during the holiday season. While, it's not necessarily bad to use your credit cards during the holiday season if you want rewards, travel rewards, things like that. But it becomes a problem to where, okay, I have this credit card, right? I pay it off going into the next season. I'm just going to load it right back up. So I'm still paying the same amount of money towards the same credit card year after year after year. How do you escape that trap? By trying to put as much money aside as you can. Even if you put $300 aside, that's still better than nothing. If you're able to do that, because we all know everyone's situation is a little bit different. Another thing I found, this was according to Bankrate, fewer Americans actually plan to stay home during this holiday season. I'm personally going to stay home. I do have family up north, but snows a lot in Erie, so last thing I would like to do is kind of get stuck up there. But I have a family here, as in my household. Try to build my own traditions. Try to make sure Christmas Day and things like that is really for us in our household. So you just gotta make the most of what you got. Call my peoples, tell them happy holidays, spend some time on them, let them check on the kids, FaceTime them. You do what you got, and you make the most out of it. Because at the end of the day, you'll have time to see each other. But quality, important time is basically, you give a call and you give a check-in. That's enough for me, because at some point, I've been here since 2019, and you kind of just get used to it. And it makes you want to work harder. Makes you want to grind, makes you want to earn more money, so that way you can have that time and that money to go see the ones that you love. It just takes time. That's really all it is. Another thing with that I found with Bankrate is only 24% of Americans actually budget for the holiday season, and that's just in general. So only 24% of Americans actually take the time, sit down, and go through a budget, what they're going to do for the holiday season. The budget doesn't limit you to making sure you have a successful holiday season. The budget helps you keep, your finances on track. That's really all it does. So if you look at a budget as a hinder, I'd rather have a budget than not knowing where my money's going, and the next thing you know, I'm so behind and backed up on bills. I then have to take more debt out to, cover those bills. So that's when it comes to a budget, you can structure your budget to where it doesn't essentially take away from you getting gifts, from you giving back, from you having fun. It just makes sure you're staying on track and making sure you have some money aside, because life will happen. Life is going to life at some point in time. And it's better to be ready for that down the road. All right. So as I said earlier in the video, beginning of the year, we had this massive tariff chart going around. And at the beginning of the year, we really didn't see prices hike. Why is that? Because one, companies stacked up on inventory prior to the tariffs kicking in. Again, you don't believe me? Go do your own research. Two, some companies actually decided, hey, we're just going to eat the cost of some of these tariffs. We have the inventory, and then we're going to really start to see in the costs of these tariffs. We're going to eat some of it. Now that's becoming less and less of a thing, and that's why economists are saying that we're really going to start seeing a price hike through the holiday season. So what does this necessarily mean? So tariffs are now being passed on to the consumer, which is you, which is me, which entails me we're going to end up spending more on these products, right? So the tariffs are, not a good idea for the day to day. It does increase your day to day without a doubt. So the reason why, so you may ask, well, if the companies were doing it before, why aren't they doing it now? Well, that's simple. One simple answer to that. They got to keep the shareholders happy. Why do you think they're laying people off? I mean, AI is part of it, but they're laying people off because we're just entering a new time, a new market. You lay people off, you're saving money through salaries. You pass the tariffs to the consumer. You're not eating that cost anymore. You're passing that to the consumer, so that way it's making your books look cleaner. So when you go every quarter to announce your earnings are looking solid or looking as best as they can be. So these companies, they're always trying to be 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. So, and they don't want to tell us that. So, if you're publicly trading on the stock market, you have to hit your quarterly earnings. I mean, just look at in the video what just happened. They just smashed through their quarterly earnings, and the stock still dipped for the week. So they're going to make sure they're going to hit their earnings. They're going to make sure they can do everything in their power to keep their shareholders or stakeholders happy. And that's going to be at the cost of the American people. That's the greed of America. And that's what it means to run a business in America when you're at that scale. It's unfortunate for us, but it is what it is. So everything is expected to increase. Electronics, toys, food, clothing, all that. Everything I already said throughout the video. You don't believe me? Again, do your own research. Go on Google, just how I did. Go on ChatGPT, go on Gemini, go on Copilot, whichever platform you use, and cross-fact each other. Same thing that I did, and that's why I'm here to deliver the information. So, according to the Google search that I saw, we can see a price increase, and this is right through Google's AI system as well. Basically, on average, about 35% across the board, they said. So, on average, electronics is set to go up $186 per shopper with an additional $82 increase in accessories. So, if I get my phone, I'm going to get my little stylus, I'm going to get my, phone case, all that, right? So, that's going to be up, $82. And what kid nowadays don't want anything technologies? Again, if you don't believe me, when it comes to the price of your games and your laptops, your gaming stuff, your gaming computers, your monitors, you don't believe me, your phones, just look at the prices last year and 2 years ago compared to now. Right there alone, you're going to notice the change. Of course, who don't like to eat during the holiday season, right? So that is the time for me to pig out. I'm not going to lie. I don't ever have 3 or 4 plates unless it's holiday season throughout the year. And with the last CPI report that we saw back in September, we saw that food increased by 3.2%. Now, there's some areas that are going to go down, some areas that are going to go up when it comes to inflation on food. But overall, we had a 3.2% gain. And that was the last thing that was released. There's a reason why the White House is looking to buy beef from Argentina now. So you had beef spiked 13.9%, coffee spiked 20.9%, sweets and sugar spiked 5.3%. Hell, even soups spiked 3.4%. All this could be going back to your families and your kids for holiday spending and holiday gifts, essentially, instead of paying all that towards the food. So all this to finally say, basically, Americans, we're still paying off a massive amount of debt from last year's holiday. 2025, you're seeing a spike with everything related to holiday season, as I mentioned throughout the video. On top of that, we recently just had a government shutdown, which added more to the U.S. debt. And if you're just looking at the numbers, man, it's not, honestly, I'm going to be honest, to me, it's not looking good. You can put the number, people can say what they want, but numbers don't lie. And the number shows that, at some rate, we're gonna hit a peak. People are defaulting on mortgages, people are defaulting on credit cards, people are defaulting on loans, car payments. Cars are at an all-time high. The average new car is like $50,000, which is insane. Bond market is trash. Housing market is trash. When I started my podcast earlier this year, the average first-time home buyer was 33 years old. as of November 30th, the first average buyer now is 40 years of age. That's insane. And then now we're gonna try to introduce 50-year mortgages. There's a reason why we're trying to introduce that, because they're trying to free up money in your pocket short term, but they're not telling you the impact it has long term. Why are they trying to free up money in the short term? Because they're saying our economy is great, but we are feeling it in our pockets. So, all right, Nick. So we went through all this. We went through credit card, all that. How can we reduce this then? What can we do? Well, the best answer I can really give you is just a budget and save throughout the year. Like I said earlier in the video, if you snowball, and then if you're able to, take that snowball method out for a couple months, a couple weeks to, save before the holiday season, go ahead and do that. Like I said, the impact on the wallets and debt on top of the massive defaults that are going on, it's not good for America. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. Prices are going to keep going up while wages are still staying around the same. On top of that, we're seeing massive layoffs heading into the holiday season. So it's just a crazy time to be alive. Even someone who's making $25 an hour, you're going to have a hard time in this economy. And we're talking about 25 an hour. That's a really good solid pay. And, we're still going through just a hard time right now. This isn't just me saying this. It's actually people who did surveys. We witnessed this in the elections that just came through. People are tired, and rightfully so. So what can we do to make sure that, we're keeping our heads at least somewhat above water? Because we all want to enjoy our holidays. We all want to make our kids' wishes come true. We all want to have Santa come through and deliver. But we can't do that when, we have a lot of greed at top. We can't do that when we have a lot of greed within these multi-million-dollar businesses, right? So the only thing that we could do is start prepping for ourselves and how we can start, saving for ourselves. All right, so, investment podcast, financial podcast. So, of course, I'm gonna give you something to take for investment gifts for kids. So here are some investment gifts that you can give your kid for the holiday season. You can invest into a 529 plan, which is a college plan. It grows over time. And kids, you can use that for your kids' like school expenses. I have a whole video on that as well. You can write them a check and have it deposited into a savings account. Checks still exist. And things like that. So I know sometimes for my brothers, I might write them like a $25 check. And for that, it just gets you in the mindset of, how to write a check, and then showing them how to go in to the bank or how to deposit a check. Because again, checks still exist, and you still need checks for certain things. Open them a high yield savings account. And, if you want to take the safer play, go ahead and do that. It's not as much as you would get from the market. But again, if you just want to, how's your money? You want to go for a safer play to still earn at least some type of APY. Go ahead and, put it in a high yield savings account. One thing is to, I would like at some point to invest into my kids. So at least if I give them one share of VOO, one share of VOO would go a long way, in my opinion, because it gives them a great head start in adulthood. Because think about it, if I did that when my kids are 7 years old, that's 11 years, at least 11 years of growth that they would have in their portfolio. So, again, would it be much? Probably not, but they would definitely have a massive head start if they had that on top of the 529 plan. So again, there's a couple things in there because, as you know, the stock market usually gives you a 10% return long term. Again, this is a long term game. Short term, you could definitely get burned. But long term, if you play it right, you do it smart, you keep it simple, it'll tend to work out. And again, just to wrap this all up, I hope you all have a fantastic holiday season. I hope you all are able to get your kids exactly what they want, have Santa come through and get them what they want. I'm not saying that you shouldn't spend money on your kids and family. What I'm saying is it's just very interesting to see the facts and to see how just 1 year can really impact your buying power and making a holiday special. So again, thank you. Happy holidays, and I hope you all enjoy your day.